This morning, President Obama will address the United Nations General Assembly in New York City. The president's speech will focus on a range of global issues. It happens on the same day he's scheduled to talk with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The meeting comes as Russia expands its military presence in Syria. Margaret Brennan is at the UN, where a record number of world leaders are gathered. Margaret, good morning.
Good morning. Well, President Obama had hoped to use this trip to the UN as a sort of victory lap for those diplomatic breakthroughs with Iran and Cuba. But instead, that's getting overshadowed by the crisis in Syria, and it's forcing him to have a rather tense meeting today with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
For the first time in more than a year, President Obama will meet with Vladimir Putin. The Russian president's recent military buildup in western Syria, seen in these satellite images, blindsided U.S. officials who fear more bloodshed. The president's isolation of Putin after the Russian seizure of Crimea failed to stop him. And with the U.S. reluctant to act in Syria, Putin has stepped into the void, taking advantage of the chaos to prop up his longtime ally, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Putin also claims that he'll begin to fight ISIS.
The risk of having Russia involved in Syria is that suddenly it becomes not just a regional problem or a Syrian civil war, but a great power conflagration.
The White House was also caught off guard Sunday when the Iraqi government announced that it would share intelligence on the Islamic State with the Russians, plus Syria and Iran.
We have concerns about how we're going to go forward.
In a meeting with his Russian counterpart, Secretary of State John Kerry said the U.S. needs to know what Putin is planning. French warplanes carried out their first airstrikes in Syria on Sunday. U.S. intelligence officials estimate that the number of foreign fighters joining ISIS in Iraq and Syria has doubled in the past 12 months to 28,000 volunteers from over 100 countries. And a $500 million U.S. program to train and equip Syrian rebels has largely failed. Less than 100 are on the battlefield, and some recently gave their weapons to the al-Qaeda-linked Nusra Front in exchange for protection.
Now, despite all this chaos in Syria, President Obama has not yet changed the U.S. strategy to fight ISIS while pushing Assad to negotiate an exit from power. But, Charlie, even that position has softened, with the U.S. and its allies now saying that Assad can stay in power for at least the short term.
Thanks, Margaret.